Several folks behind me who I will introduce. But the reason we're here today is, I think, for a very important announcement, very timely announcement, and an announcement that, when you think of what has transpired over the past several months, not only here across New York State and Western New York, but really across the country, we're here to announce $50,000, which I am proud to say was a part of the New York State budget. $50,000 for a school resource officer here in the city of North Tonawanda. And given everything we know that occurred at the Parkland school in Florida, but also at the school in Maryland, where we saw an SRO prevent and save lives and stop a school shooting in its tracks. But really, I think that kind of misses the point. To me, when I've talked to law enforcement personnel and school resource officers, they will tell you that they're really here to prevent that day from ever happening. They're there to make sure that there never is a school shooting, that a school shooter never comes in, because this is their beat. They get to know the students, they get to know the teachers. In many cases, in a community like North Tonawanda, the resource officers probably know their parents, they know people in the community. And so $50,000 is one component that covers about half the cost of a school resource officer. The city of North Tonawanda, the city school district, have also pledged to cover about 25% each of the remaining amount. So you have three different entities. You have a collaboration between the city, between the school district, and the state of New York to make sure that we have a safe school, that we have a school resource officer that's here to protect students, not just from a terrible shooting or some kind of incident like that, but really to protect students across the board. They may find something out and might be able to get a student mental health resources. They might be able to de-escalate a situation before it ever gets to a certain point. They might be able to work with parents or teachers as well. So I think people have to look at a school resource officer not just as a guy who's there or a girl who's there to stop a bad guy, but they're really there to make our schools safer in the most comprehensive way possible. And I can tell you, in all the schools across Niagara County that have school resource officers, it absolutely is a benefit and has proved to be an invaluable asset and resource to those districts. So I'm proud that we could return a school resource officer here to North Tonawanda. I can tell you the school district has asked for this for several years. I want to recognize a couple folks who are behind me. We have our school superintendent, Greg Wattilla. We have assistant superintendent, Brad Rawls. We have our principal, Jim Fisher, here as well. And of course, we have our police chief here in North Tonawanda, Roger Zagolak. And we also have our Mayor Art Pappas, who is here. You're going to hear from a few of those folks very shortly. So, but the school district had reached out to me for several years now, seeing if there was anything we could do to get some kind of funding for an SRO. And we weren't successful in previous budgets. Sometimes it's difficult when you're looking for sort of a $50,000 in a $160 billion budget. Doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it can fall through the cracks. But clearly, with the discussions that were underway this year in the state capitol, with school safety and school violence, and how do we prevent school violence, to me, the most practical way is to provide a school resource officer in our school districts, particularly our high schools. There's no question they are an asset. They will make the school safer. And I think when you think about, there's a huge debate across the country, certainly when it comes to gun control. But the reality is, what we know is, when you go into an airport, when you go into a courtroom, when you go into so many places, you go into a sporting event, those are safer places and more secure places than schools, and very often. And the one denominator there, besides obviously some physical safety issues, but the biggest denominator is you have law enforcement. You have folks who are there, who are assessing the threat, who know the people in the building or in the facility. And that's what's very often lacking in many of our schools. And the truth is, it becomes a cost issue. It becomes a very difficult thing to fund year after year when you're also trying to fund education initiatives, mental health initiatives, extracurricular activities. You have a 2% tax cap. So there are a host of reasons why this becomes challenging. But I want to credit the school district and the city. It's not enough to say it's a priority. Show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities. the school district and the city have, as I said, have offered to put funding up roughly in about, I think it's going to be roughly about $25,000, but I'll let them speak to that. But roughly, they're going to put up about 25% of the cost each, and then the state comes in and covers half at $50,000. So I think you really see a commitment from every level of government here in North Tonawanda to make this possible today. So it's an important announcement. I think it's a timely announcement, and I think it's a real credit to the people behind me that this was able to happen today. So I'm just proud to be able to stand here and say we had $50,000 from New York State to bring a school resource officer here into NT. So with that, I want to call up a friend of mine, someone who has served families and students in the North Tonawanda School District for many years, and that's our school superintendent, Greg Witilla.
Great, thank you. So the Senator, as always, did a great job explaining how this is going to work, but some of the things that happened this year that make it a little bit different was we had a real priority with next year with the new configuration, having middle school, high school on this Meadow campus, and talking about that. So through our capital project, we were going to be addressing cameras and door locks and those types of things of safety, but we are in the business of education, and an SRO officer is just that. It's the education piece to safety, as the Senator touched on. We will be having him talk with and go into classrooms and do things. We're starting a new freshman academy for our 9th graders, and we've already talked that will be an instrumental piece of that program, is to have them work with and discuss safety topics with the school resource officer. The building administrators next year are ready to get this going, and that would be Greg Burgess behind me, Jim Fisher, that will be middle school, high school respectively, and Brad Rolls, who was very helpful as the assistant principal here at the high school, working with keeping in touch with the Senator's office this year to make sure that this was the year it comes to fruition. In addition to that, I've been meeting with the city officials. So we sort of have a bi-monthly meeting where this has been coming up, and then started talking more and more with the police chief, how this will work, making sure we have the right officer in place, and enhancing our already security guards that are off-duty police officers. So it's not, this is the only thing we're doing. This is an enhancement, and it really is going to address the education piece that is so critical across, I think, all school districts to continue with safety. We have to educate the kids, the teachers, the parents, and this will be a huge help in that. So with that, I will turn it over to the police chief, who, like I said, we've been working with, and a little bit about how we will move forward over the next few months to make sure this is in place for September.
Thank you, Superintendent. There's been a lot of effort put into this between the police department, the school superintendent, and the mayor's office. I first and foremost would like to thank Senator Ortt for his efforts in securing the majority of this funding. Without that, we probably wouldn't be here today. It's unfortunate we live in a social climate now where law enforcement in an educational setting is the rule and not the exception. And this has been a long time coming. I think we're long overdue here in the North Tonawanda School District of having a school resource officer available to the high school and the middle school. But collaborating again with the city and the school district, we've still got a lot of work to do to accomplish this. I'm hoping that first day of school for September 2018, we will have this officer in place as not just a law enforcement figure in the school, but as a mentor and an educator to the youth in the school also. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Arthur Pappas.
Good afternoon, everyone. And just like to start out by thanking Senator Ortt for his efforts to bring this $50,000 to North Tonawanda for the availability of a school resource officer. The whole thing with bringing money together is so important, but even more important is bringing the people and the entities together to make a safe school climate and to bring our students to school every day feeling safe and the community feeling safe about their children being in our schools. The fact that the state, the police department, the city, the council, everyone working together is what makes things happen. Sometimes funding is hard to get, as the senator alluded to, and when he gave his remarks. But in the end, we have to look at where our priorities are. And of course, safety in our schools and in our community is a top priority. The police department has been excellent working toward this. The state, the school officials, everybody has had this as a priority to make sure that everyone is safe in our community. They say that the schools are a reflection of our society, and to a degree that certainly is correct. But our schools, when we bring it closer to home, are a reflection of our community. And our community wants to be safe. We have a safe community. We want to keep it that way. And that's because of the working together of all these entities, whether it be the state, the county, the police department, the fire department. Everyone working together is what makes it happen. So I just like to thank everybody concerned for what is going to happen here. There is so much more, and the educational piece is going to be so important, because that is going to have to go out to the community too, because the community has to be made aware of what a school resource officer really does. He or she is going to be doing so much more than just patrolling the halls. There's an awful lot to it. And so community education will be vitally important, as well as the students being educated in the classrooms. So I'd like, again, once thank Senator Ortt, thank all the departments for working together, the administration, the police department, because I think only the best positive thing can come as a result of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. And just to echo too something that the chief actually alluded to, and then the mayor kind of talked about, there were some folks in the state assembly that actually went on the record, I believe it was the speaker, who said he was against funding SROs across the state because he didn't think the answer to school violence was more guns in school. That was his actual quote. And I really think that just misses the point entirely. No one's talking about just putting more guns in school. We're talking about bringing a law enforcement official, someone who's obviously trained, and this is going to be, there was a time, and I don't want to, I was never in law enforcement, but I'm sure the chief could echo this. There was a time when the school resource officer was the person you might have, wanted to hide. And so you didn't want him on the road, so you sent him over to the high school or the middle school, or that was where they went to finish out their career before they retired. That is not what you see in today's SROs, certainly the ones I've seen. In most cases, you have SROs, they want this job. They want this beat. Maybe they have kids. They care about the school. They're trained in how to interact with teachers and students. These are some of your best police officers, quite frankly. And I think that's very important going forward. That's who's going to be here. That's who's going to be working in these schools. And to the mayor's point, I think, saying that we just don't want, police officers in schools, I think just really misses the point on what these individuals can do, not just when a situation may occur, but to prevent that day from ever even coming into existence. So with that, we'll certainly take any questions from members of the media. Yes?
How many school resource officers have there been at North Tonawanda High in the past? Are there any here now?
That might be a question for the superintendent.
No, the North Tonawanda City School District security at this point for the high school is off-duty police officers that maybe they're trained to be police officers, but not specifically in the education piece. So this will be the first.
How many off-duty police officers are there right now?
Well, there's a pool that bid on shifts, and there's usually two. We try to have two in there at all times. So the resource officer would be an addition for next year. And remember, the campus is growing to be 712 instead of the elementary high school. So we'll be able to spread out a little bit.
Following the Parkland shooting, there was a string of local threats of violence made by students in Erie County and in Niagara County. Was that a catalyst for this?
Certainly for me it was not. As I said, this was something that had been requested for probably the past 2 years that I was in office, talking to both Superintendent Watilla and Assistant Principal Brad Rowles, they had made this request at least for 2 years to me. And so, that was really the catalyst. Obviously, when you had the recent threats of violence and, of course, the recent acts of violence across the country, it certainly made it more timely and maybe added some level of urgency to it. But the fact of the matter is they had actually been looking for this for a couple years now. I think if you were to talk to a lot of school administrators, and maybe the superintendent could maybe add to this, most school administrators, long before you had the rash of the shooting in Maryland, the shooting in Florida, they would have told you that they would have always liked to have an SRO in the school district. They thought it was an asset if done right. The issue really becomes a dollars one. Generally speaking, if you have to cut a teacher or an SRO, you're going to cut the SRO because your primary focus is education. But you have to be educating kids in a safe environment. And so if the state and the city can come in and make this a priority the way we are, I think that makes it a little easier for the district to shoulder some of that cost.